Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer. I'm Patrick McPartlin and I'm joined by Liam Bryce. And we are going to discuss the match between Hibs and St Johnstone, Nick Montgomery's first game in charge at Easter Road, and finished in a 2-0 victory for the home team, courtesy of goals from Lewis Miller, his first for the club, and Dylan Venta. Liam, not a bad way for Nick Montgomery to mark his home debut.
Yeah, aye. He was saying on Friday that he'd been visualising what this kind of moment was going to be like. I don't think he could have imagined it going too much better than that. I think there was a lot to like about how Hibs played, especially in the second half. I think first half St Johnstone's shape sort of made it difficult, and there was a bit of patience required. And I think he touched on that post match as well. Said he was happy with how the players stuck to what he was asking them to do, despite kind of the odd bit of tension in the crowd who are wanting the ball to maybe get forward a bit quicker. But I suppose that it's a case of, as well as the players learning how the new manager wants to play, in terms of the fans and us as observers getting used to that as well. But yeah, I think there was a lot to like. Two good goals. I think St Johnstone, they limited Hibs to not an awful lot. They were pushing up quite high and man marking, Joe Newell and Jimmy Jago in the middle of the park, and it sort of made it sort of difficult for Hibs to play through, and there was a wee bit of kind of indecision at times. But I think it was probably one of the first times that Joe Newell managed to get his head up in the St Johnstone half, that he picked out Miller towards the back post. I think it might have been James Brown that switched off and let him sort of ghost in behind. It was a good finish. And that obviously changes the game, because St Johnstone, I think, had been relatively content to sit in until then. They did threaten a couple of times, maybe half chances on the counter. In fact, Dan Phillips had a really good chance at 0-0, blazed it over the bar. But afterwards, they kind of gets in the way of their game plan a wee bit, and they have to sort of come out. And I think you saw more space open up in the second half for Hibs. Ellie Yuan coming on, I think did make a bit of a difference. He injected a bit of pace and urgency into things. And the second goal was really well worked. It's probably the type of football again that Montgomery would be envisaging that his team that he wants them to produce on a regular basis. So yeah, obviously, first 3 points for the new manager. On his first game at home, I don't think it doesn't come much better than that for him.
Definitely. And I think as well, Montgomery said this himself post-match, that I think he would have been happier if there'd been more goals scored. There was certainly a host of opportunities. Certainly in the first half, there was maybe slightly fewer, but I think certainly in the second half, there were chances for, Ellie Yuan had one chance that Dimitar Mitov saved well. Young Rory Whittaker, who we'll talk about later, obviously had a really good chance for a debut goal. And I think there were, Paul Hanlon came off the bench, wasn't far away with a header towards the end. And I think it's under Lee Johnson, Hibs weren't exactly short of ability in the final third. They certainly had, chances. They certainly scored a lot of goals. But it certainly seems under Nick Montgomery that there is more of a kind of drive to just, have chance after chance after chance. I think the stats were something like 20 attempts on goal today, which, as the manager said afterwards himself, you do that home and away every week, you're going to score more goals than you don't, presumably. So I think it's interesting to see from our point of view as observers that not only are Hibs looking a bit better defensively, certainly just based on last week, it's only been another week's work of the training ground, but they're another a clean sheet. Can't really argue with that. But at the other end, they are looking a lot more fluid, a lot more slick, and that sort of front four doesn't matter who's there. It's sort of where they're playing, who's involved. It's quite sort of frightening for defenders to face, isn't it?
Yeah, I think certainly as the game wore on today, it became more difficult for St Johnstone to deal with. Runners in behind. I think especially in the second half, Martin Boyle got a lot of joy down the right-hand side. Whereas I think in the first half, a lot of it was in front of St Johnstone, where they were, they'd have been much more content with that. But I think and Nick Montgomery touched on this himself after the game, is the fluidity of the front four. I think at any time of the game, you could see one of them pop up in any of those four slots. And I think he said, he doesn't necessarily think of it as two wingers and two strikers. It is just a front four. So, it's it really did seem to click in the second half today, which I think for Hibs fans is quite encouraging, because it's only the second game under his management. And some of these players, they look to have really taken to it already, and I think it's there can be maybe a tendency to overthink attacking football at times these days, and I think you've got players of kind of Boyle's ability. Lafondra's obviously a very intelligent player. Venta, as we're seeing, is a good finisher. Yuan can be he can be electric as well. It's just giving these guys a bit of freedom to go and express themselves. It's they're bound to create chances. They're bound to score goals. And as you said, I think they certainly had more today. I think you had the one Yuan placed over the bar. That would have been a really good goal if he'd been able to apply the finishing touch to that. But I think when the only complaint you're coming away with from a game is, we should have scored more goals, I think Hibs fans have got to be really, really pleased with what they saw today, and I think the clean sheet is probably just as pleasing as well. To be honest, St Johnstone, they didn't offer too much going forward. Once Hibs scored, it was a case of like, okay, what have you got about you? And they didn't. Their best chance, as I said, actually came at 0-0, I think, and they didn't show too much in that regard. So I think the Hibs backline will face tougher challenges than they did today. Obviously, St Johnstone had Chris Kane out as well, who's quite an influential player for them. But yeah, to keep the clean sheet, I think after what happened last week, it will breed a bit of confidence in the back four. I think a lot of people, I think it's myself as well, I think I actually predicted that Paul Hanlon would start instead of Rocky Bashiri.
Yep, join the club.
just because I was kind of thinking, in terms of getting a lot of the ball, that he might have opted for Hanlon. But fair play to Nick Montgomery, he stuck with Rocky Bashiri today, and when it could have looked like he was jettisoning him really after he was kind of involved in some of the Kilmarnock goals last week. So that'll be confidence for him. Will Fish as well. Lewis Miller, who got on the score sheet, he must be flying at the moment. Jordan Abita came in as well. So yeah, a lot of positives going forward, but I think that to get that clean sheet will be a real confidence booster across the park and the dugout as well.
Yeah, I think there was, apart from that Dan Phillips effort, I think there was one chance in the second half, which I think Marshall actually pulled off a really good save from Considine, and I think
he did. Yeah, completely forgot about that. Yeah, and a great save.
I think I can't remember if that was at 1-0 or 2-0, but regardless, I think given what we saw last week, just the confidence that they'll get from keeping that clean sheet, from a save like that, you're right, it does breed confidence, and that's 2 clean sheets out of 3. One at Pittodrie, which is obviously for Hibs, it's been a really hard place to go in recent seasons. I think really over the past decade. And then obviously, today against St Johnstone, who were something of a bogey team for Hibs not that long ago. And there was a certain sort of role reversal, I think, with this cross to the back post and the full back powering in to head in a goal, which I think the likes of Sean Rooney did time and time again a few seasons back against Hibs. But I think we should also talk about Rory Whittaker, who came off the bench for the last 20 minutes to make his debut. Just turned 16 last month, which I think is making a lot of us feel extremely old. But I think a really strong performance, belying his years, not afraid to get stuck in. Had that wonderful opportunity to score, and if it hadn't been from a really good save by Mitov, might actually have got that debut goal, which as Nick Montgomery said afterwards, probably would have lifted the roof off Easter Road. But an assured showing from someone so young. The youngest ever debutant in Hibs history, unseating Jamie McCluskey, who's held onto the record for a good number of years now. But it's really good for the other youngsters in the academy to see the fact that the new manager's come in. He's given the youngsters a chance to get involved with first team training. He's going to watch their games. He's watching the under-18s games. He's watching the academy games. He's watching development squad games. So he knows who's available. He knows who is deserving of a chance, who has the right attitude. It's a heck of a compliment to Whittaker, but it's also something for the other academy players to aim for, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it sets a real motivation then, isn't it? They'll be looking at young Rory and thinking, well, if I apply myself properly, if I put in good performances, I know that the manager's watching, and it could be me that was next. But as you said, it's a great achievement for young Whittaker. I think it was at 16 years and 44 days. So he's barely turned 16, and that's it's a brilliant moment for him, brilliant moment for his family. I think you rightly said it made all of us, or most of us, I think, in the press box feel very old. Honestly, it doesn't feel that that long ago that I would look at footballers, maybe mostly on the telly or whatever, and think, oh God, that guy's only a couple of years older than me. And now I'm at the stage where I'm reporting on, as I said this on Twitter, I'm reporting on players who probably don't remember the 2014 World Cup. So in that regard, yeah, I know. But in the main, it's fantastic to see that. He got a great reception as well. Just if only he'd stuck that chance away, it would have been the absolute perfect day for him. But I'm sure he'll get more opportunities, and I think Nick Montgomery said himself after, he's obviously earned it. I don't imagine any manager is going to just, especially when there's early stage of the season, still so much to play for, that they're not going to just throw in young kids just for the sake of it. He's obviously earned that opportunity. He's obviously deserved it. And he'll hope it's obviously it's the first of many for him. But it was really nice to see. It was a nice moment, and he looked he looked assured, he looked confident. And as I said, you've touched on it, that it kind of sets a precedent almost for the young kids in the academy, that if you apply yourself properly, if you do well, then the chances to play will come along. Which again, for the club's point of view, and from a fan's part, I think there's not few things that fans like to see more than a young homegrown player coming through the academy. And establishing themselves in the first team. Obviously, there's a long history of it here, and yeah. So who knows? We might have seen the next one here today.
Indeed, and I think it's just another example of the kind of bold calls that Montgomery isn't afraid to make. We maybe saw that with. I know there was some question over whether or not he had a minor knock, but starting Hanlon on the bench last week. I mean, that's your club captain who you've dropped. As we discussed earlier, as we wrongly predicted in our, I think both our predicted lineups, that Hanlon would come back in. He's kept faith with the same, three of the same four that started last week. You could maybe argue that bringing in Jordan Abita in place of Lewis Stevenson was quite a big call. I mean, we know how many pretenders to the throne, if you like, Lewis Stevenson's seen off over the years. But that was a really, I mean, you could see, I think, why he brought in Abita today, just to have that extra kind of attacking threat from fullback against a team that was probably going to sit in a little bit more away from home. But those sort of bold calls, I think it's Montgomery obviously having faith in the players that he's got at his disposal, but also his own decisions. And I certainly don't think it'll be the last kind of big call we'll see this season. Just before we wrap this up, probably worth talking about Jair Tavares, who made his first start since August last year. Obviously came off the bench last week. There's been a lot of positive kind of comments about his attitude in training, and sort of, I think, just his overall approach to games. His cameo last week by Nick Montgomery. How did you feel he played? Obviously, it's been a long time that he's had that start.
I mean, I didn't think he was a standout, to be honest, in the first half. But I don't think there were many standouts in the first half. It was a wee bit stuffy. It was a bit attritional, and it was just a case of St Johnstone kind of closing down spaces. But I think he did fine, to be honest. You could maybe tell he's not played a lot of football of late. A couple of touches here and there, just kind of a bit loose. But he seemed, keen to make an impact. He worked hard as well. And again, it was an example of the kind of bold calls that you're talking about. Having watched the team play so well in an attacking sense for an hour last week, it must have been tempting to just pick that same 11 again. I know there was some kind of concern around fitness for Doidge and Yuan, and they were maybe just rested with a mind, being mindful, of the fact that there's another 2 games to come in less than a week. So there was maybe an element of that as well. But at the same time, to bring in a guy for your first your first home game at Easter Road as manager, to put faith in a player who has barely kicked a ball for quite some time now. Again, it was a bold call from Nick Montgomery, and it shows Jair Tavares as well that that manager has faith in him to go and do well. I don't think he was ever going to play the 90 minutes today. I'm not sure if you've not started a game for so long, but I think there was definitely signs there. He had a shot on goal in the first half. He had some nice touches, some nice link-up play. And I'm sure as he gets more in sync with the guys around him, I mean, he is obviously a talented young footballer. It's just not quite happened for him at Hibs so far. But clearly, Nick Montgomery sees something in him, and he'll need, if he's going to, if you're playing that front four, they need, you need to have a degree of squad depth. You need to have options to change that up, and he obviously sees Tavares as part of that. And he'll have been happy to get back in amongst it. I'm sure I'd imagine it's been a difficult period for him.
Mm-hmm. Just before we wrap up, obviously we'll be doing a lot more video content ahead of Wednesday night's game, but hate to bring this up given how badly wrong we got it today, but can you envisage there being more kind of changes from Nick Montgomery just to kind of keep things fresh? And we mentioned the fact that Christian Doidge could come back into the reckoning. Adam Lafondra put in a really good shift today, but he's got those options to kind of rotate. Do you think we'll maybe see that again? We'll see sort of like 3 or 4 changes, just looking to freshen things up, keep everyone kind of on their toes, if you like?
Quite possibly, yeah. Very hesitant to make predictions given how far off the mark my team selection was, but obviously that's why I'm not the manager. I think if you obviously seen Christian Doidge had the headgear on today, and they were just, I think Nick Montgomery said he'll be getting his stitches out tonight.
Saturday night.
Saturday night, yep. And yeah, I mean, that would suggest that maybe I'd imagine he'll maybe come back into contention for cup game in midweek. I think he'd definitely potentially a useful option against a team like St Mirren, who are good side, but they like to make it difficult for you as well. I think Doidge, you could possibly see him come back in, but the fact that we're sitting here talking about could X player play, could player Y come in, it shows you that Nick Montgomery's got options that he's comfortable using. Clearly, we're seeing that even at this early stage. Without putting my neck on the line again, I'd say we probably will see a couple of changes.
Well, we shall find out very soon, and obviously you can see our extremely bad takes on what the lineup could be on Wednesday night later on this week. Thank you for joining us. Do check out hibsobserver.co.uk for the latest from today's match. And over the next couple of days, we'll have plenty of analysis and just a look back at Nick Montgomery's first game in charge. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers.